Welcome back to another video, guys. My name is Emmett Enyart. For those of you that don't know me or you're new to the channel, well, let me tell you this. I really enjoy deer hunting and I really enjoy shed hunting. So in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the 10 biggest shed antlers I have ever found. These are all off of whitetail deer. And so I'm dropping this video today because I'm going to be out at the Great American Outdoor Show when this video releases, releasing my new business, Cat Trax. It's a company that's predicated on producing elite hunting gear for mobile hunters. And the premium product that we're releasing is the Commando. If you're there, I highly recommend you stop by. The only disadvantage of doing this is that it takes away 2 great weekends of shed hunting here in 2024. So what I've decided to do is make a couple videos like this one, keep you guys entertained until we can get back to shed hunting. So with that said, let's dive into the video. Good sized antler. Holy cow, look at this. Oh my gosh, look at his brow tines. Look at those. Holy cow. Coming in at number 10 on my list of biggest sheds, it's this triple brow tine shed right here. Also, if you're wondering what's holding these sheds up, I make these antler anchors that I sell on my website. I'll put the link in the description if you're interested in getting some. I also got shed tags there as well, but that's not the point of this video. So this is my 10th biggest shed. I found this one in spring of 2019. Holy cow. It was February, if I remember right. Scored 71 6/8 inches with 6 horrible points. Never found the other side, and then didn't get pictures of this deer the following year. Found it on a south-facing slope that was on this open timber, basically, where this ridge ran up over the top, and right where it started to face on the south side, there was a couple cedars on the bank, and it was laying right underneath one of those cedars. So really cool shed right there. 3 brow tines. That's number 10 on the list. Let's move on to number 9. We got a nice one right here. Oh yeah, we're just on the last section here, and that is exactly the buck I wanted to find. Yes sir. Look at that thing. Look at that brow tine. That is so cool. He's spurred out right here like that. So coming in at number 9 is a shed off of a buck I know all too well. That's a buck that I call Blackjack. And as you can see here on the wall, I've got quite a bit of history with him. Not actually a lot of trail cam history with him, but this shed I found in the spring of 2022, March exactly. But because he has such a long main beam and he's got a really nice brow tine right here with this split that's got some good inches to it, it adds up to about 72 6/8 inches. You can see I found his match set the year prior. I found those relatively earlier. Those were in like February of 2021. But that winter was pretty hard, and a lot of deer were shedding their antlers early. I never found the other side of him in 2022, and actually I had rattled him in fall of 2021, which would have been the year that he had this set, and I saw him about 400 yards out, rattled him in. He closed the distance to about 80 yards, but then coincidentally another buck came out with a doe, and it basically ended up screwing up my opportunity because he saw that doe, he pushed the other buck off and ran off with the doe. One of my favorite encounters, but it just didn't work out how I wanted it to. Well, fast forward a couple days, I ended up filling my tag on another really nice buck. I ended up finding this shed that fall, and then I ended up actually rattling him in again the following year, and you can see I ended up getting him. I have a video of this buck on my page. You should go check it out. It's a really good video. Really, really cool story with this deer. I'm very fortunate, very lucky, and this is one of my favorite sheds. And it's really cool. I love his brow tines here. I love how they split off. You know, I called him Blackjack because of this year. If you look at the tips here on his 2 and his 3, how they start to turn black, it's like, it reminds me of a velvet deadhead. Like when I found some of these deadheads that were in velvet, they'll have these like tips that haven't fully grown. And that's exactly what these look like. And I haven't seen this before on shed antlers. Either way, that's my 9th biggest shed. I told you a little bit more on this because I had a great story with this deer. We'll move on to number 8. I cannot even explain how excited I am right now. I just found what probably is going to be the biggest shed of this year. This is the buck I call Longhorn. He's an absolute freak. 6 on his right side, so he's an 11. And he is an absolute stud. Look at that. So coming in at number 8 is a shed off of the buck that I called Longhorn. Found this one back in February of 2020, and it is a awesome 6-point side that scores 73 and 7/8 inches. It's got a really nice main beam to it, and obviously the 6 points help it. I've got permission to hunt this farm in the fall of 2019 and started running cameras and started getting pictures of this buck, but he was nocturnal and very infrequent. He was an 11-point, but this was the better side of the two. So anyways, in February of 2020, went in specifically to look for his antlers and spent all day looking. There was over 15 miles on the ground at that point, and ended up walking up on this guy just sitting on the edge of a grass field, tines down. Ended up running cameras on that farm again the following year, but he already had a big body, so I didn't think he would grow much, and my assumption was right because he basically became a 10-point and was a little bit smaller. It looked like he would have scored a little bit smaller, but his patterns were almost identical to the year before. And then I had like one picture of him in daylight, and that was during the rut. Fortunately for me, I tagged out earlier that year, so I didn't do much hunting on Longhorn. And I do think I got pictures of him the following year, but I didn't do much hunting there because we moved. So, yep, there's Longhorn for you. So we were changing the cards in the last camera, coming down the field edge right here, and we could see one laying out there in the middle of the turnips. We couldn't see it actually from the side-by-side over here, but as soon as I got off the side-by-side and walked over here, I got a perfect angle on it. Gosh, I hope this is that 9-point side. It's the 9-point side.
Nuh-uh.
If I could have picked one shed from all the deers I had in camera this year, this would have been the shed.
Nah. I wonder how long it's been here.
Holy. Coming in at number 7 is, he's number 7 as far as my biggest shed, but I would possibly put him up as number 1 for most impressive shed. And the reason I say that is because this shed is off of a deer that I believe was 2.5 years old. I don't know what the top 10 deer that are in the world right now looked like when they were 2.5, but I have to imagine they looked something like what this deer did. And that is Omega. So Omega, the 9-point here, that scored 76 and 7/8 inches. His other side was a 7-point side, and I estimate that would have been around 65 inches, and he probably would have been at like a 12 to 15 inch spread. He wasn't very wide because he was pretty young, and he would have been somewhere around 150 inches as a 2.5-year-old. He started to show up in the summer of 2022, and when we first got pictures of him, it was like unbelievable how much antler he had on his head relative to how small his body was. You just looked at his neck and looked how tight his gut was, and it was like, holy cow, this deer really could be 2. When he disappeared after the summer, like I think the last picture I had of him in 2022, in the early part of the season, was like somewhere in September, and he started to show back up late November and then stuck around for the late season. And hit some of the food sources, and that's actually where I found this shed, out in a turnip plot that I was checking a camera in, which was a really exciting find because like that would have been the number 1 shed I wanted to find. Fast forward to 2023, EHD is really bad. I find a shed antler buck during the shed season, real close to where I found his sheds that had pedicles about the size of this. Could have been any deer, but you know, I'm just naturally going to assume the worst, that it was him. And I just figured this deer was dead. To my surprise, in November, he showed back up in 2023. And it was super exciting because one of the neighbors, the neighbor that I think he primarily bedded on, was open to passing this deer at 3, and so were we. This deer became extremely impressive. He was everything I thought he would be at 3. You know, if he was 150 inches at 2, I was expecting him maybe to be somewhere between 170 and 180 at 3, and that's exactly where he was at. Unfortunately, we ended up finding out what he actually scored because the first weekend of the shotgun season, he ended up dying. Was shot by somebody 2 neighbors over, an out-of-state hunter that came in during the shotgun season, got an opportunity, and shot him. He ended up scoring, I think, like 175 with 3 kickers broken off. So he probably would have been around that 180 mark. By the sheer amount of antler he's got here for how small of a pedicle he's got and how young he is, I don't think we'll ever see a deer with this much potential again. Just don't even want to think about what this deer would look like when he was 5. Okay, so that's number 7. Omega's number 7. It's relatively, to me, it's a heartbreaking story. I love that shed, but like, I don't want to think about that deer right now. So, talking about that deer just puts fresh salt on the wound. Just knowing that he died probably, like, I don't know, like 2-3 weeks ago. But anyways, we're going on to number 6. And number 6 is a shed that I found back in February 2017. It's got 7 scoreable points with this 1-inch nub on it. And this one scored 77 and 1/8 inch. It comes off of a mainframe 10 with double drops. On this side, it's got 1 drop. But I got permission to hunt this farm in the fall of 2016. I was in college at the time, had some free time, and decided to go out and shed hunt a little bit early because I knew a couple other people like to hunt this farm, and I was like, well, I'll go see if there's anything that dropped early. And with this being the first time that I really walked that farm, I was walking under a cedar thicket and could see, I don't remember if I saw this side or the other side, but I saw one of the sides, and they were a good ways out. They were probably like 30, 40 yards out. I first thought it was a branch, and I didn't have any binoculars on me, and I'm like, I'll probably just walk by. I'm like, no, I better go back and look at that. And when I walked up on it, I was extremely pleased to see that it was a matched set with double drop tines. This was the bigger side of the two. So I talked to one of the guys that hunted the farm to see if there was any history on this deer, and supposedly, like a couple years prior to when I got permission to hunt it, there was a big double drop tine buck that was shot by a group of shotgun hunters. The guy didn't have any pictures of it, but he said that this set was likely off of that deer. He said that the deer was, north of 180. It was a really impressive deer. You know, one of the valuable lessons I learned with this shed was to use binoculars. If I would have had binoculars with me, I would have just pulled them right up, looked at it, and then been able to say, oh, that looks like a tine. But I didn't, and I almost just walked by. And then they could have been left for somebody else to find them, or I could have found them the next year or later on in the year, and they might have been even further chewed. So it was a learning lesson. It was like, thankfully, I told myself to go look at it, but it kind of gave me an insight like, hey, binoculars aren't a bad idea. Good lesson with this deer, but that's number 6 at 77 1/8 inch under a cedar thicket. Old antler, but not a bad one. So one of the origin ones that got me really hooked. So if you want to see more on the other side, make sure to stay tuned for the match set video. You'll see that there's a couple other ones coming up here that we have the match set too, but I'm not going to show you today. So we're moving on. That was at 77 1/8 inch. We haven't been here 10 minutes. I think we see one. Easton's going to lead the way. Just go right up that way. Hold on, don't. Wait. Oh boy, that's a big one. That's a big one. Left delay. Pick that sucker up. Dude. Are you serious? So coming in at number 5, we're only going up 6/8 of an inch, but we're losing a couple points here. This is a 5-point that I found back in the March of 2021 with my little brother Easton. This one really stings. And the reason I say that is because unlike number 6, where it was my first year shed hunting a farm, with this one, I actually shed hunted that same farm the year prior. And I think the reason that we saw it the next year is because it got sun bleached and the tines stood out a little bit more amongst the native grass. And I saw basically the 2 tines sticking up out of the grass. And because they were thicker than the grass itself, it just caught my eye immediately. And then we went over and looked at it, and it was like, oh boy, that one is way more impressive than I thought it was. So we never ended up finding a shed off of this deer from that year in 2021, and we didn't find the other side of this one in 2020. So maybe he got hit by a car. Maybe it was just a complete fluke that he dropped it where he did that year. Who knows? But I did end up running cameras on that farm the following year, and I never got pictures of a deer that looked anything like this or was anywhere close to the size this one would have been. So really impressive shed. A little bit of a bitter taste because it might have been on the ground in 2020 when I shed hunted it. I'm happy we got it. There's not a single chew mark on it. The only thing that's wrong with it really is it's a little bit dirty on its pedicle and it's sun bleached. Definitely the most impressive 5-point I've got. I mean, really, it's 70. It would score 76 7/8 as a 4-point shed. There you have it. Let's move on to number 4. It's found my biggest match set of the year. Holy cow, you got to see these. Okay, so we're just moving down the line here. But at number 4, I don't have a name for the deer, but it's off of a flyer set. And this is the 4th biggest antler I've ever found. And actually, I've got the match side to this, but this one scores 78 5/8. I found it in February of 2018. Pretty cool story with this one. I skipped my college class to go looking because there was snow coming the next day, and I was like, I want to go out and look that farm. It was really cool how I found this set together. The other side scores, right up here with it, but this one just scored more by a little bit. But it's got 7 points, nice brow tine on it, 2 really cool flyers that come off of its too, and a nice main beam to it. The main beam thickness is actually more after the G4 than it is between the G2 and the G3, which I've seen that a couple times, but it's pretty cool. It just doesn't get recognized in the score. So anyways, really impressive antler right here. If you want to see the match side, I'll have that in my top match set video. So a little bit of the backstory on this deer. The guy who owned it didn't let hunting, but he let me look for antlers on it. It was only like an hour into looking, and I come up over the top of this hill, and there is this shed laying with its other side. Cool, they were laying right next to each other in this overgrown pasture that was about 50 yards from a cut bean field. This overgrown pasture was probably about 4 or 5 years old, so it was really nice. It had some relatively tall cedars where it had some good cover, thermal cover, but also some nice native grasses that these deer laid in. And that's exactly what this deer was doing. He was laying up against some brush. He must have just got up out of his bed and dropped both of them right there. Went back to the landowner, asked again if there was any chance I could hunt it that coming fall. He said no, because he ended up selling it that summer. So he sold the farm that summer. So it easily could have been shot the next year, died of old age, maybe died from EHD, something. But it's one of my most impressive antlers. I love this antler. But let's get on to number 3. This one I found in March of 2017, and it scored 82 3/8 inches with 9 scoreable points. Really cool antler here, but as you can see here in the video, this one was old, and I actually found this on a farm. It was the first time I was shed hunting that farm. I got permission earlier in the winter, and basically we had gotten 4 inches of snow, and I knew that there was a nice cedar patch on this farm, and I ended up walking through a bunch of nasty thick cedars, and it was kind of surprising. This antler was just laying there. I don't think that this was just a year old. I bet it was I was there for a couple of years. The antlers cracked quite a bit, but because it was under all these cedars, there wasn't many squirrels that got to it. The sun didn't hit that bad. That's why it probably, has maintained the integrity it has. A lot of its score has to do because it has 9 scoreable points. It's got 2 kickers here off the base, a nice split brow tine, and it basically is a nice 6-point side with a couple of added features to it. The interesting story with this one was the landowner didn't tell me when he gave me permission to shed hunt that there was a guy who actually leased it for deer hunting. So luckily we got that fiasco figured out. I asked the outfitter about it. I was even like, hey, I'll give you this shed back if you want it, but he actually didn't even recognize the deer. So I have no idea what happened to this deer. Don't really have much of a backstory. Basically just have a really nice antler that I found on a snowy day in a thick patch of cedars. So we'll move on to number 2. And I look back, I'm like, no, wait, that's not a stick. That's a freaking monster shed. Holy cow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Monster. Coming in at number 2 is, if you've watched any of my videos, especially the 2023 ones, you'll recognize this deer because it was the biggest shed I found that year. That was hammerhead, 9 points, 85 3/8 inches. Really cool deer here. Doesn't have a big brow tine, but has a really impressive main beam that ends with a cool double-sided tine that looks like a hammerhead. That's why we call him a hammerhead. And then he's also got a flyer off his G2. So like I said, scores 85 3/8, and I actually ended up finding 3 other sheds off of this deer in the past years. I found 1 shed off of him with Easton back in 2022, and then found his match set in 2021. But it's on a farm that I have permission to shed hunt, but don't have permission to bow hunt. So I don't run cameras. I didn't know what he looked like going into this year, but I'll show you the sheds from past years. You can kind of see what he looked like. Check these out. I scored this one at 53 1/8, and I scored this one at like 52 1/2 if you assume that the G2 was as tall as this G2 and the G3 was as tall as this G3, but it's hard to tell because it's already chewed up. I came in the next year in February with Easton. There was a little bit of snow on the ground. Found this shed, and it was pretty obvious to me that it was off of the same deer because he's got that short brow tine with a tall 2 and a tall 3, and this year it turned into a 5-point. And was hoping going into 2023 we'd find a shed off of him again, and I am beyond shocked on how much he grew. We talk about went from 53 inches to like 63 inches, and then he jumps up to around 85 inches with 9 scoreable points on this one. One of the distinct features that I can point out with this deer is he has that same short brow tine. His main beam's really tight. Like, it doesn't swoop around. It's really tight off the base. I haven't seen any pictures of the neighbors that might have shot him. So I'm hoping he makes it through. But yeah, that's number 2, 85 3/8 inches. So with that said, enough from Hammerhead. Let's get on to number 1. Number 1, with 6 scoreable points, it's off of a deer that I call Cobra. This is a really impressive antler. It's 88 5/8 inches. We took it to the Deer Classic. I don't remember what year it was. And it got first place for the biggest typical shed in Iowa for that year. I found it in February of 2017. It was a unique circumstance of where I found this. It's considered public land, but it's only, like, for shed hunting, it's only open to the public for 2 different days during the year. But it's like during the normal year, it's actually public land for anybody. You just have to fill out an application to hunt there. So anyways, I went in there in February of 2017. We walked all day. I remember being like, hey Dad, let's go check one more spot before we leave. We went and checked that one last spot. We were heading back to the truck, and on our way back, I looked down in this ridge where it was a timber that kind of rolled down to a creek bottom. And I remember looking down there, and I'm standing up on top of this ridge about 50 yards away, and I could see down in there, and I saw like tines laying like this. I'm like, holy cow, that's a shed down there. Go down there to look at it, and as I'm walking up on it, I mean, it's like, holy cow, that's a really nice shed. But what happened was, it was laying like this, and the leaves had actually fallen or like blown over on top of the G2 and the brow tine, where they weren't immediately obvious. And so all I saw was the G3, G4, and G5. I could just see the mass. I'm like, oh, it's a really good antler. And then picked it up off the ground, and I didn't realize it was as impressive as it is, but it's a doozy. Just an unbelievable brow tine on him right here. He's got a nice main beam. The only thing that I could really say that this deer doesn't have is mass at its first mass measurement. Right here around the pedicle, it's got really small mass. But then like the mass right here, how it's palmated between its 2 and its 3 is really, really cool. I'll give you more insight on this deer in the match set video, because we do end up finding the other side and then find the match set the following year. But yeah, super cool. So that's my number 1. Counting it down, looking back, I've got 3 over 80 inches, and the rest are between 70 and 80. But one thing to remember when you look at all of these, right, is the number of miles that go with it. I've been pretty bad lately about tracking how many miles I actually walk each year for shed hunting. In the earlier years when I did it, it was like at least 150 miles, and now we're talking like at least 400 miles. I mean, I'm putting in a lot of miles in some of the best parts of the state, in one of the best states for whitetail. I do have a nice list of top 10 antlers, but I'm hoping at one point, we'll be able to do another one of these videos, and it might be completely revamped, where maybe this one will be lower on the list. I mean, that'd be the ultimate goal, right? Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, I'm dropping this video right now because we're at the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. So if you're there, make sure to stop by our booth. We're gonna be at the Cat Trax booth. Thanks for watching, and until next time.